Well, then I'm happy to thank you for calling on me. I just maybe one small comment. I'm familiar with some of your work, Neil, and I enjoyed the article that I've read earlier. My actual comment is to you, Michael, because since you called on me, you spoke about Haskamon, about approbations, and you raised the question of what happens when we have a forged approbations, where you're writing it under someone else's name. So I just want to add, there's another category as well of where the author writes an approbation for himself,
okay.
Either under a pseudonym, or he writes the work anonymously, and then he needs to give himself an approbation as a way of getting around. And there you don't get into problems of who are you misrepresenting in those cases?
The users, the readers, right? The buyers.
But you're not misrepresenting the buyers. You're fooling the buyers.
Fooling them, yeah, of course.
Right. So there's just that. There is that other category of.
Authors do that on Amazon all the time.
but it's actually they didn't invent the trick, right? This is a trick that the first chief rabbi of the state of Israel, Israel, not the state of Israel, Rabbi Cook, he did it himself in one of his early books. He published a book, and he didn't make up it wasn't his idea. His father-in-law had done it previously, and his father-in-law writes in the introduction, "I know the author. He's an upstanding gentleman, and we can rely on everything that he says, except for the following points." And then he annotates his own work. Now, this is a trick that is that you said it's in Amazon, so I was fascinated by it, and so a couple of years I published a small work that wasn't aimed at the academic community, Hasidic tales about watches, and it was for a friend of mine who was a watchmaker, and so I collected a whole bunch of Hasidic tales, but I wanted the work to be taken seriously, so I knew I needed a haskama. So I gave it to myself as my alter ego, the Maggid of Melbourne. So this is not a comedy routine.
It gives new meaning to putting yourself in your own bootstrap.
I'll say there are also, by the 19th century, it was sort of a notorious practice of rabbis issuing haskamot without having read the book. So Nathanson was actually had a good reputation for being one of the few that actually read the books and commented from them.
I haven't read the book, but I still didn't know.
Right, because of the person's reputation. Yeah, it's not entirely illegitimate. Yeah.
Well, but historically as well, for example, the fairs that took place at the Council of Four Lands. So when a book would come out and people would be asked to write approbations, it's highly unlikely they could have sat around and read it. So they glanced at it, said, "I've turned a few pages perhaps, and that's..."
I know the author.
I know the author, and therefore that's reputation is really. So they're not really reading through the books and saying, "I agree with everything in it, but guy's a good guy, you can rely on him."
And perhaps as a result, there were just a handful of books that made it through. There were books of some proto-Haskalah.
That was very interesting, you know, extremely
yeah,
interesting, some of the details of that.
Just in a story, if people are talking about no stories, recently in Israel there was a book, a biography on the late of Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. He was one of the big chachomim in Jerusalem. So biography, usually you don't need haskama on biography because it's like stories. But in the religious community, a biography on rabbis is the way to educate the children. So usually you get haskama also on biographies. So, but one of the guys who wrote the biography of Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, he asked haskama of one of his sons. His son is Rav of Tveria. He's still alive, and he refused and he rejected. His answer was because you take all kinds of stories and you mingle them together with no logic, and the man who read the stories will see that Shlomo Zalman Auerbach was a mixed man. Was like today he he answered like this, and tomorrow like this. You don't understand the guy, so you misguided the people. So he gave him a reject. And in the book, he printed the rejection in the front. He printed the haskamas of some other guys, and the rejection, the hitnagdut of the son of Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. So this is one of a case that you could see some in recent years that someone published some reject. And there's another, maybe another case in America. There was Moshe Feinstein. Moshe Feinstein gave some rabbi who is not alive anymore. Anyway, he asked him for haskama, and he was not so happy about his attitude. And he wrote to him, "You will write anyway what you think, and I don't think so. You don't need haskama because anyway you will write." And he printed it. There's so many cases like this that are between haskama and not haskama, and usually you see only the title line of the name of the rabbi. You don't dig into the
Clauses.
The unauthorized version of.
the censor also. Today there is a religious small children books. There is also a haskama that they are like politically correct, and there is a board of directors in Bnei Brak who sit and gives you a haskama that they are like without any problems, without kosher, and there is a board that gives this sign, this temple.
And is that something that readers would look for?
There are schools that will not approve books without this sign. Go into like a bottle of shtia of food without hechsher. They wouldn't put it into the library of the school. It is something very common, and because various reasons. And this is one of the methods. Priya maybe there's another thing that called farnumerenten. Farnumerenten is prenumerenten. That's like a poem of the book. Usually people paid in advance for the book to be published. Pre-subscribers. And then there was printed out only one volume or one chapter of the book, and the Rav who saw no one saw more than one chapter. And the haskam was given on this one chapter, and the pre-farnumeranten, so everyone, so later on 90% of the book was not seen by no one, and the haskama was on only one chapter. It was very common. And today, Rav Eliashiv, who passed away many years ago, he had one standard haskama. The haskama was of the person that he endorses him hatzlacha and everything. If he endorses hatzlacha, and it means that the book is good. And sometime he gave him the allowance to use the same haskama for book A to the book 2 and to the book 3 and the book 4, and that was like the hechsher that he is qualified. There are many methods in the recent years.
I have a question, I guess for Neil, but I'm interested what other people think about it as well. So I haven't read the book yet, but from what I gather, the tone in recent centuries is for halachic authorities to feeling they sort of have to catch up with secular copyright law. Like there must be a Jewish copyright law because the market demands it or whatever it is. And yet we know from people like Michael, but I know this as well, right? So there's a lot of contemporary today critique of copyright law, introductions of public domain, etc., right? Of over-propertization of intellectual property. Now you might think that Jewish law, traditional Jewish law is a great place to start to critique contemporary copyright because it doesn't believe in classical Jewish law, it doesn't believe in copyright law. So do you see any of that at any point in the history that you discuss, or in recent times where people said, not just for formalistic reasons, but no, we're not going to go along with copyright law because we don't think it's good?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've seen a couple instances where, first of all, there is this debate in contemporary circles between the much more limited copyright, which I think is the majority rule in Jewish law, which is it's a very limited right to sell the first edition. It's really right up against wrongful competition. So it doesn't go to private copying, it doesn't go to many of the types of uses we might describe as fair use, versus the Nazi school, more of a full-fledged property right. The Nazi school, I think, is really much more a minority school. So the mainstream majority view, is a much more limited right than there is in secular copyright. And I've seen one or two sort of defenses of that, and saying, well, in secular copyright, there's also fair use, as where the private copying is prohibited anyway. So why should we feel compelled to follow that in Jewish law? And you see also some statements like even if Jewish law is a property right, the right is abandoned with respect to copies on the internet, because in Jewish the law of property, there's a notion of abandonment that if the Zut Shoyam, right? If the item of property goes into the sea and the owner has given up hope of ever recovering it, then it's abandoned property. So there are a couple of rabbis that say, on the basis of an analogy, it's impossible to enforce copyright on the internet. So therefore, that's akin to Zut Shoyam, and can't enforce copyright. It's been abandoned. But I will say that the general tenor of contemporary sort of rabbinic thought when writing about copyright is the sense that there's the universal norm is one of copyright protection, right? And that there's something almost we have to find something in Jewish law that can approximate this right of literary property, and there isn't much attention paid to the contemporary critique of literary property, I would say. So here and there you do find it, but I found that the major thrust is the sort of the sense of something lacking. Maybe it's not there. Right? We have to recognize that Jewish law is not the same as literary property, but that's too bad. Amika has written about contemporary copyright also. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amika, do you want to answer? No? Okay, so let's say thank you to all our speakers. Thank you very much, especially to Neil for the ball.